I'd like to start by sharing some highlights from the 2020 Energy Efficiency Indicator Study. It's a tradition with the Energy Efficiency Forum to actually release this annual survey, which has been going on for 14 years, at the Energy Efficiency Forum and have a small discussion about it. The results were released this morning, and Wall Street Journal already picked up on the story. So I think it's really cool when the efficiency community can have the Wall Street Journal talking about increased investment in energy efficiency and net zero energy buildings. So that's a good start to the day. While the insights of the study always provide for a rich discussion, it's not often that we have the opportunity to discuss the implications of the research during a coronavirus pandemic and a presidential transition. So I'm going to ask Susanna, who's behind the curtain, to show a couple slides. I'm going to give some brief highlights, and Susanna, I'm going to, of course, change it up a little bit. So I'll cue you for which one I'd like to see. The data is good news. 55% of organizations surveyed in the United States, commercial, institutional, and industrial building facility directors and energy managers, plan to increase investment next year. Now, if you look at the chart, it looks like, well, that's a drop. Well, a funny little thing happened from November and December in 2019 when we last did the survey, called the COVID-19 pandemic. So it's not surprising that energy plans to increase energy investment dropped a little bit, but I went back and looked at the data in 2010 and 2011, and actually we're on the same path to recovery in investment in energy efficiency than we were in the Great Recession. So I actually view this as fairly positive that in the middle of the pandemic, over half of organizations plan to increase their investment in energy efficiency next year. The next slide is really interesting. So what's fascinating, and which I affectionately refer to as the Maria Vargas effect. Maria Vargas is the director of the Better Buildings program, and probably the best marketer in the energy efficiency industry writ large. She saw results similar to this, where organizations that make goals around energy or carbon invest more. They invest in more measures, they invest in greater amounts, and they're much more likely to increase their investment. Well, this certainly came to play this year, where 65% of organizations that have goals are going to increase investment, and no one without goals. So I hope Maria Vargas is listening to this broadcast, and she's writing those down for the next Better Buildings Summit. Indeed, I kind of think of it as a New Year's resolution. If I tell my family that I'm going to lose 10 pounds on next year, am I likely to do it? Maybe. We won't go there. Now, if I put it in Twitter and I had to commit to a certain loss, and if every Friday I tweeted whether I was actually doing it, would I be more likely to? I believe that's the case. So the number one thing we found as a driver of investment is, in fact, commitments. The next slide is also very interesting. So for 14 years, we've been asking people about green buildings. Do they plan to have certified green buildings? Will they pay more to lease space in a green buildings? Green buildings data kind of hung in there. It came back a little bit, particularly people willing to pay a premium to lease space in a green building. There may be a reluctance to pay a premium in a building they're not currently occupying. But two trends continue to increase dramatically. One is net zero energy or carbon buildings. Fully 70% of the organizations we surveyed plan to have one or more net zero energy or carbon buildings within the next 10 years. The other trend that's increasing is resilience, the ability for buildings to withstand a number of different emergency, natural disaster, and power outage type conditions. So This is a trend that has been increasing twice the rate of green buildings overall, a big issue. The last graph we're going to show here before we open up the discussion is every year for the past 5 years, things like HVAC equipment replacements, building control upgrades, things like that have been the largest or the improvement measures that have seen the greatest investment across the survey. But this year, we looked at what things are expected to have the biggest increase in investment. And it's really interesting, I think, in that investment in demand management and demand flexibility is expected to significantly grow. So the integration of building systems with distributed energy resources is going to increase 15% next year. Non-renewable distributed energy generation is going to increase by 19% from the previous year. And the integration of building systems with the utility grid is going to increase by 16%. Now, these are really big increases. Over the 14 years, probably the largest single year increases. The idea of integrating buildings with the utility grid is often referred to as something called GEBs, Grid Interactive Efficient Buildings. David, I don't know if you coined that acronym or term. I don't know if I should thank you for having done it. It is a bit of a strange term, but
I did coin it, and you should not thank me.
Yeah, but I'd like to turn it over to you first, and then I'm going to go back to net zero carbon because it's such an important factor in New York State with Representative Tonko. David, you must be feeling really good about these results, and it couldn't be better timing considering you just released the Connected Communities FOA, which is really the buzz of the industry, with so many communities thinking about putting together proposals to be able to demonstrate these technologies across a range of different buildings around the country. So David, what do you think?
Yeah, thanks, Clay. It is very exciting. And I think it shows a trend that is deserved and overdue. I do want to acknowledge Congressman Tonko first, though, who's been one of the great leaders. I say that not just because he's a New Yorker, but that doesn't hurt, but from when he led NYSERDA to his leadership on energy and commerce and he joked, look, he joked, I'll give you a hint, I used to work for Ed Markey. If I could say this, Congressman, no congressman ever gets reelected or rewarded for energy efficiency. It's not quite as noticeable as some of the other things that you all are responsible for, the nation's defense and healthcare and all that. And the fact that you do it with such a sophistication and aplomb and hard work is noticed by all of us. I hope by your constituents too, but certainly by every professional in the field. And we hold you in the highest regard. So
thank you, David.
It's an honor to be on this virtual panel with you.
Thank you. And back at you, your leadership has been stellar, and I really appreciate your kind words. You know, there's so much work to be done yet, but listening to the report made by Clay and others, it's encouraging. It tells us that when we invest here, there are lucrative dividends.
Yeah.
And you know, it's why I think even with the downturn in the economy, we're still seeing serious investments being made that will perhaps make us comparable to 2017 and 18. And, you know, we saw what happened with the Recovery Act nearly, you know, over a decade ago, and how investing in energy efficiency was the beginning of good things.
Good. I hope you're right. But let me respond to those points. But let me also make a broader observation. I treat those, and I looked through your report, Clay, very interesting. But there is a bit of a Rorschach test to it, isn't it? Isn't it? I think we're going to see, and I hope the conversation we have today, I think it's a half full, half empty conversation. And there's a lot of good news in this report. There's a lot of investment, a lot of commitment. That's the half full part. On the other hand, it's fun to be in front of a fireplace and to be toasty. But when planet Earth is heating up at the same rate as my living room is right now, we realize that those glasses are half full and that it's not at the pace that we will need to get to in the future as as we all know. But I think that your findings show a lot of things that are important and interesting. And let me focus on the last part. You mentioned grid interactive efficient buildings, and our DOEs can work on that, and our work on connected communities to build them together. As I like to say, if one GEB is a good thing, then a lot of GEBs must be a better thing. That's what a connected community is. But what I take away from your chart and how that growth in the desire for demand flexibility and for grid integration, how that's grown, not only grown in this year when other commitments have shrunk, number one, so that's but two, as you just said, the level of growth from previous years was as fast an increase as you've seen in the questions you've asked over the years. My interpretation of that is several-fold. One, that companies realize that traditional efficiency, however valuable it is, and it's very valuable, needs to be improved to grid interactive efficiency, or as the Alliance calls it, to active energy efficiency. Time to up the game of energy efficiency. And I think your companies, the companies you surveyed, are reflecting that. They're very excited about upping the game. Two, I suspect, I don't think you quite determined it from those summary tables, that they're investing in renewable energy and variable renewables such as photovoltaics and wind. And with those variable renewables, for all their benefits, having some measure such as storage or demand flexibility to help balance the loads from the natural variations is essential, and that gives greater value to demand flexibility. So I think I presume they're understanding it. And three, there's just that much more money to be saved, and it's easier than it used to be, thanks to the ubiquitous revolution in microprocessors, in sensors, in wireless sensors, in cheap wired sensors. You pick it, whether it's Thread or Zigbee or Bluetooth, however it got there, it's gotten so prolific, so cheap, so powerful that not only is demand flexibility more valuable, but it's easier and cheaper to acquire. So I think all those forces are converging together. I'll give some credit to the Alliance to Save Energy and to the Building Technologies Office for catalyzing it, or being in the right place at the right time, or all of the above. But I think this mix and this integration of renewables, efficiency, the awareness of environmental impacts and climate change, and of course the role that Congress and the entire federal government plays are all pushing in the same direction, and we all have to pick up the pace. I think this is one of many slides, if I can be so bold, to suggest that Congressman Tonko's and my work is a lot of it is yet to come here, as is our fellow Americans. There's a lot left to go.
Yeah.
Thank you, David.
Let me just say that,
Yeah,
let me just jump in and say,
ahead,
with the Building Technologies Office and EERE program at DOE, we really need to respect the work they do. And that means taking up the workforce count to where it ought to be and investing in the agency, and in particular in that given area, because it's obvious that these investments bear great savings and enable us to be sound stewards of the environment and of our energy supplies. And so it's very important for us to move forward with that, especially after we've witnessed this whole COVID impact, where the workforce in the clean energy zone had dropped precipitously after it had record numbers of workers. Was it 2.3 million Americans prior to COVID-19? It was double the rate of growth in the job picture for the U.S. So that is where the huge volume of job growth was, and it's only smart investing if we bring the money David's way over at the buildings effort and EERE.
Congressman Tonko, one of the other questions we ask in the survey is, which policies drive the greatest increased investment in energy efficiency and renewable energy in buildings? And for the last couple of years, the number one policy has actually been building benchmarking. And of course, benchmarking and disclosure has been something that we've seen increase across the country over the last 10 years. But New York State, the city of New York City and Washington, D.C. actually are notable, being the first two cities in the United States to put in building performance standards. It's called Local Law 97 in New York, and is going to significantly increase the rate of renovating buildings. If you look at the results around an interest in net zero carbon buildings, and if you look at 97% of organizations saying that policies like building performance standards, and oh, by the way, building codes, appliance standards, we see policies driving investment at a federal level, at a state level, and at a city level. And I'd like to close out the fireside chat today by talking about what would be your advice for a new administration in being able to leverage energy efficiency, put the 200 and something thousand energy efficiency employees back to work and be able to address climate change. Do it in an equitable,
there are a number
inclusive
of things.
way.
Obviously, investing in efficiency programs and making certain that we put a focus on broadband, because COVID has taught us that technology is essential if we're going to.
We have an internet gremlin again. Representative Tonko appears to be frozen. Usually he unfreezes. David, would you like to start on that general question around the role of policy and what the incoming administration should do in order to
that's always a good way to
efficiency?
It's a good way to unfreeze the person, is have the other person start talking. I would give and will give, when asked, the same advice I gave to this administration or the one before it or the three before that. And it's the same advice to any administration. And in fact, Sheila referenced it earlier when she was speaking. Energy efficiency is the largest, cleanest, least expensive, and often cheapest energy resource in this country, full stop. And our energy challenges are big enough. There is plenty of room for other energy resources as well. There should be, but energy efficiency accomplishes so many goals that everybody at the forum knows all about. Seems pretty basic, right? But that's always the advice of a new administration or new players, because it's invisible. It's in negative space, and it's not always so visible. And I'll return to Congressman Tonko, who I think got reconnected.
Yeah, I don't know why we keep losing signal here, because I'm in the office building and it should be fine. But
you said broadband, and look what happened. Yeah.
Yeah, there you go, magic word. But investing in that technology so that we can then incorporate all of the advancements, investing in research so that we can continue to build upon the successes of the past, making our buildings more connected and smarter, get to unlock new opportunities for efficiency related technologies. We're going to work on infrastructure. I'm so encouraged by the Biden administration coming in with a plan for commitment to climate and making certain that there are these investments that will be made, and doing an infrastructure package that's holistic, not just focused on roads and bridges, but on energy efficiency, on technology, on broadband, making certain that we focus on critical facilities like hospitals and schools and nursing homes, distribution centers, data centers, public safety facilities. All of this will enable us as a society to maximize the investments. And guess what? We're going to put people to work when we do that. And when we give the resources to David and his team and EERE and the buildings program and DOE, then we know that the federal government is doing its thing. You bring back the standards and the regs that will motivate and inspire and challenge us. And you have those chartered goals as a nation, and you invest in the workforce development and in the programming, and all these great things can happen. So I'm excited about it. It's a brand new bit of fresh air and a fresh approach to what is a science-based, evidence-based challenge for all of us. get into the academics, do it that way, and don't take us backward.
Can I just add, Clay, before we
Please.
run out of time? I just want to be in wild agreement with Congressman Tonko, and not just about my office budget, but including my office budget. But but look, what I just saw in your numbers, including the zero carbon interest of buildings and zero energy, and what Clay you talked about, what the congressman talked about, is that spectrum that we know as market transformation. And I'll start on this hand. It's the research and development that my office does, the national labs, NYSERDA, right there, the universities, the R&D into new technologies and new practices through field validation and demonstration to show the world that they work, using connectivity, consumer-facing information, such as benchmarking or home energy scores to allow them to make informed decisions and make these practices business as usual, to building codes and appliance standards to lock in those savings. And then it's shampoo, rinse, repeat time, start to invent something new so we can start that cycle again. That's the way we need to do this. The opportunity is there. I think the will is there. And so that's those activities that the congressman just talked about belong in that spectrum. And there's a role. Different players have different roles on this, right? Some are going to be very active in the deployment or the educating of consumers about the opportunities. Others are better with R&D. Others are going to promulgate standards or be responsible manufacturers and live to the new standards. It's a whole spectrum, but it's all of the above time. The opportunities and the challenge are there. So let's go do it.
Absolutely, I agree. You know, the track record is there. The successes have mounted, and that ought to be proof enough to us to expand upon success and utilize the intellectual capacity that we have in this nation and work in a federal concept so that we are standardized across the country. So, but David, congratulations. You've been a big champion and recognized for it, so congrats.
Well, you've both been champions in the eyes of the energy efficiency community, and it's been a great pleasure to have you join us today for the fireside chat. David says glass half full, glass half empty. We do indeed have a lot of work to do, but I think you've both given us great optimism that over the coming months and years that energy efficiency can really make a difference, can put people back to work, it can address our climate challenges, and it can do in a way that's equitable and inclusive. So we can bring everyone along with us. I'd like to congratulate both of you again for your induction into the Hall of Fame. And I would now like to turn it over to Sheila, and I believe we're going to go on to hopefully induct another champion of energy efficiency into the Energy Efficiency Forum Hall of Fame. So, Sheila.
Thank you, Clay, and congratulations to David and to Congressman Tonko. Absolutely fascinating, and we are so honored to have you join us by the internet. But it is a real honor to have you with us, and you made our day very bright by your very thoughtful comments.